Part 102. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 1011. Chapter 1011 Car Accident 6. Not long after, Xian Kaiping came over, and Tanyuj also came over at the same time. Secretary Zhang behind Tanyuj was escorting a man behind them. "Why is he here?" Qian Yuman couldn't help but screamed when she saw the person Secretary Zhang had arrested. Xian Kaiping's face looked ugly. When he saw the woman he loved crying sadly, he immediately walked over and hugged her into his arms. "I'm sorry for putting you in a dangerous situation." Li Ning lay in Xian Kaiping's arms, shaking her head gently and shedding tears silently. Tanyuj came over and looked at her from above to make sure that she was really fine, and then he felt relieved. During this period, people have been sent to protect Qian Yuman. Things like today happened so suddenly that it was impossible to prevent them. Fortunately, she only had some broken knees. If the car really hit her, he would crazy. Tanyuj opened his arms. He originally wanted to give Qian Yuman a warm hug like Xian Kaiping. Thinking of their current relationship, she definitely didn't want others to know about it, so she endured it in the end. Tanyuj observed her complexion carefully, and found that her complexion was obviously worse than in the morning. Her complexion was no longer rosy, but rather pale. Her heart twitched, and finally she raised her hand uncontrollably and touched her face. "You look very bad. Are you injured somewhere that I can't see?" "Don't worry, I'm fine. I just lost a little blood and am very weak." Qian Yuman glanced around and found that Xian Yingzhe and Xian Kaiping were looking at her and awkwardly grabbed Tanyuj's hand without leaving any trace. "Take his hand away." Tanyuj turned back to look at Secretary Zhang. Secretary Zhang immediately understood what the boss meant and took the person in his hand over. Tanyuj raised his foot and kicked his foot hard. Qianchenggan, who was unable to control his body for a moment, lay face to face on the ground. Secretary Zhang raised his leg and stepped Qianchenggan's back. "Mr. Tang, why is he here?" Qian Yuman frowned and looked at the person who was stepped on the ground by Secretary Zhang with disgust. This was the first time she met Qianchenggan in the past 3 years. When she saw Qian Yunyun jumping around in London, she guessed that Qianchenggan was also in London. But she didn't expect that when they met again, he would be trampled under someone's feet. "He is the perpetrator," Secretary Zhang said coldly, cruelly raised his foot, and before Qianchenggan could get up, he stepped on the ground hard. Qianchenggan coughed violently in pain, and his facial expression became hideous and disgusting. He looked very pitiful, but Qian Yuman felt better than ever before. Qian Yuman was originally a person who held grudges. Even though Tanyuj helped her get revenge, her feeling of disgust for her uncle still existed. No matter how much punishment he received, she would never forget what Qianchenggan did to her. She would rather not have this relative who only cares about money than to have him always appear in front of her and disgust her life. Now that he knew better, Qianchenggan was the culprit. Qian Yuman's face instantly turned red. He stood up suddenly and wanted to walk over and teach Qianchenggan a lesson. As a result, she forgot that she had just drained a lot of blood, her body was still a little weak, and she was a little anxious when she stood up. Her vision went dark for a while, and she almost fell back to her seat. Fortunately, Tanyuj had quick eyesight and hands to help her in time. "Are you feeling weak? Sit down and take a good rest." End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 1012. Chapter 1012 Car Accident 7. "Are you feeling weak? Sit down and take a good rest." Tanyuj gave the order in a somewhat domineering tone, which made Qian Yuman feel warm and nodded repeatedly to reconcile with Tanyuj. I know your uncle is fierce, so I can just sit back and relax." Qian Yuman looked at Qianchenggan on the ground again, feeling sick again. "Qianchenggan, do you have any humanity? I provoked you somewhere, do you need you to drive me over? It's not me, Qian Yi Manfu, who is so lucky. I am the one lying in the operating room now. Qian Yuman had no idea that Qian Chengan came to see him before, let alone Tang Yu's lesson to Qian Yunyuan, which Qian Chengan regarded as her doing. He wanted revenge, and instantly turned into a demon who only wanted revenge. Bah, you know it yourself, Qian Chengan sneered and rolled his eyes at Qian Yuman. At the same time, he noticed Li Ning, who looked exactly like Qian Xiener, and shouted in surprise. Sister, why are you here? When Qian Chengan saw Li Ning, he thought he was his sister. Don't change the subject. I'm asking you, why do you want me to die? Even if I break away from you now, I am still your sister's daughter. How could you do such a cruel thing? Qian Yuman's anger has been rising. She is really angry and mad at Qian Chengan. Sister, daughter. In my opinion, you are my enemy, a sworn enemy. You used to let Tang Yuj mess with me, and now you let him mess with my daughter, causing the company that I finally made a comeback to go bankrupt again. You have put me on the verge of bankruptcy twice, and you are the one in my life. If I don't get rid of you, I will never succeed in this life, Qian Chengan roared, his bloodshot eyes almost roaring, and his expression was even more serious. The ferocious horror had not been stepped on by Secretary Zhang forcefully, she would have thought that he was going to rush out and bite her to death. She couldn't help but take a step back and get closer to Tang Yuj's chest. What I did to Qian Yunyun was just some small pranks, what about that? Qian Yuman thought Qian Chengan was talking about the prank she asked Dongfang Xiang to do last time, and she looked silent when she heard him keep saying he wanted revenge. Then she looked at Tang Yuj beside her. Is there something I don't know about? Tang Yuj smiled awkwardly. It was about Qian Yunyun and Lisa that night. I did something a little bit. Tang Yuj said in an understatement, but Qian Yuman heard a lot from it and understood what was going on. It turns out that it was Qian Yunyun who harmed herself, and finally Qian Chengan, and in the end Qian Chengan needed to face her and carry out a series of revenge actions. Mr. Tang, I don't want to see him at all. He wants to hit me to death, and the murder charge cannot be escaped. As for what happens next, Qian Yuman said meaningfully, and winked at Tang Yuj mischievously to convey her message. Want to express? Tang Yuj was smart enough to know what Qian Yuman wanted to say. It was inevitable that Qian Chengan would go to jail. Since the result of the car accident was not very serious, even if Qian Chengan was sentenced, it wouldn't be long. Who were Tang Yuj and Xian Kaiping at that time? Just say hello and say a few words. Even if Qian Chengan is not guilty, he can be sent to jail for a few years. What's more, if Qian Chengan really did something unscrupulous, he might not be able to escape from prison after 10 years. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1013. Chapter 1013 Car Accident 8. Xiaozhang, take him down, Tang Yuj ordered. Yes, boss. Secretary Zhang moved away from his call, grabbed Qian Chengan's collar, and pulled him out of the door. As soon as Qian Chengan heard that he was being taken down, he immediately shouted for help at the top of his lungs. Sister, help brother, help me quickly. I know I was wrong, please help me, beg for mercy, sister. Qian Chengan kept shouting at Li Ning, not realizing that Li Ning was not his sister at all. No matter how he shouted, he was still a stranger to Li Ning, a person who was almost his own son. The culprit has been brought to justice, and what we are waiting for is the news that Xian Yuanxun is okay. Xian Yuanxun itself was not serious. The rescue time was not long, and the emergency lights went out. As soon as the doctor came out, A group of people gathered around him. The wounded person is fine. We just need to arrange a general ward later. The patient has a sprained foot and needs to be nursed back to health for a while. The aorta on the thigh was cut and bled a lot, so a lot of blood will be needed for the next period of time. There is nothing else. The doctor said and left. Xian Yuengxun was pushed out. Li Ning cried while grabbing his son's hand and teaching him a lesson in a low voice. You kid, you just want your mother to worry about whether you can save someone next time and ensure your own safety. Li Ning was very sad. Looking at her son's pale face, she even shed tears of distress. Mom, I'm fine, I still don't have the strength to speak. Xian Yuengxun comforted his mother with a smile. Qian Yuman also breathed a sigh of relief, but actually felt very guilty. What happened this time was all because she implicated them. Fortunately, it didn't lead to serious consequences. Xian Yuengxun only needed to have a good rest and he could be alive and kicking without leaving any sequelae. With Tang Yu's support, Qian Yuman walked to Xian Yuengxun and expressed her sincere thanks. Brother Xian, thank you. We are all a family, how can I say thank you? But I also want to thank you for donating your precious blood. Now a part of your blood is flowing in my body. Xian Yuengxun smiled slightly and could also say a humorous sentence. It showed that he was really fine. Qian Yuman was also reassured. Brother Xian, I have decided that you are the big brother. If Manman needs help in the future, I will not look back. Qian Yuman stretched out her hand and patted her chest, expressing her lofty ambitions. Okay. Xian Yuengxun smiled slightly and was pushed to the luxurious ward by the nurse. Qian Yuman was also sent back to the hotel by Tang Yuj. On the way back, Qian Yuman was still a little unhappy. Mr. Tang, do you also think that I am a bad person? Because of this incident, I frightened the mother and son of Xian Yuengxun. One of them was frightened and the other was lying in the hospital. What are you thinking? It's me who really needs to apologize. It was me who didn't handle the matter well that made Qian Chengan want to retaliate against you. Even Qian Yunyun's matter is none of your business. You were just I'm involved. Tang Yuj comforted her gently, just because Qian Yuman couldn't figure it out. Next time, I promise that I won't leave anything to hold you back, so please forgive me. Tang Yuj looked at Qian Yuman sincerely. Qian Yuman was originally in a dull mood, but Tang Yuj's last two sentences made her laugh out loud. Then he sighed helplessly and stopped trying to get into trouble. After this car accident, Qin Yi Mank did not dare to run to the Xian family these days. She felt guilty for their Xian family. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1014. Chapter 1014. Dad Chi is here. 1. After this car accident, Qin Yi Mank did not dare to run to the Xian family these days. She felt guilty for their Xian family. Qian Yuman was inexplicably put on leave by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Although they said they had nothing to do and gave her time to rest and see the beautiful London, couldn't the smart Qian Yuman guess that all this was done by Tang Yuj? It must be this who loves and hates her, because she took some student blood and wanted her to have a good rest in the hotel. Qian Yuman had extensive experience in donating blood before, so the blood was not taken away much. He was just weak for a few hours, and then he was fine. On this day, Qian Yuman rushed to the airport early in the morning to pick up someone. Qi Zhan is here. I heard from Qian Yuman that when she first met Li Ning, Qi's father was about to come over. However, the company has been too busy recently and cannot spare any time. As a result, it has been delayed for more than a week. Qian Yuman has been telling Qi Zhan everything about this, and even told her father the results of the paternity test. At that time, Qi's father still wanted to come to London to see with his own eyes Li Ning, who looked exactly like Qian Xian'er. He wanted to use his own eyes to judge, rather than the pair of data. Even if Li Ning was not the woman he loved, he could at least look at the face that was exactly the same as the woman he loved. Just by looking at it, he was satisfied. So Chi's father finally arrived after a long flight. The moment Jian saw her father, she rushed over and hugged him hard. "Dad! I miss you so much. I haven't seen you for a long time." Jian and Chi's father don't meet many times a year. They are separated from each other, and Jian is unwilling to return to China because of the knot in her heart, so Qi Zhan flies over every time to see her daughter and her lovely daughter. Little grandson. Manman father Qi was also very happy to see his daughter and hugged her hard. Although he has two daughters, both of whom have gone abroad, and Qi Lili often disappears without knowing what she is doing. His eldest daughter is studying abroad and busy with work, so he and the lonely old man wait at home every day for their children to come back. Seeing Jian, Qi's father was even happier than Jian. "It would be even more perfect if my precious grandson was here." Dad Qi couldn't help but say what he hoped for most. He really misses his cute little grandson, who is very cute and considerate. The last time he saw her was 3 or 4 months ago. "If Dad stays abroad for a while, when I return to Paris, you can go back with me." Jian hugged her dad's arm affectionately and walked towards the airport exit with a smile. "Strange, didn't I hear that Kenny is here too? Why didn't I see anyone?" Dad Qi looked around. Although he was asking about Kenny, he was even more curious about whether Jian was hanging out with Tangyuj again during this time. During the last video chat, he saw that Tangyuj was starting to play around again, and he was very pleased. Although Kenny is a very good man and is very suitable for his daughter, he hopes that his daughter can get back together with Tangyuj. Although his daughter always keeps saying that she doesn't love Tangyuj before they break up, and she will dodge in any in-depth conversation. How could the father not see that this young couple was having trouble with each other, and if nothing unexpected happened, they would still be together? "He is waiting for us at the door in his car. Let's go quickly." End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1015. Chapter 1015. Dad Qi is here too. Jian pulled Qi Zhan's father out of the airport. Kenny, who drove over, immediately got out of the car and greeted him. He took the suitcase from Qi Zhan's hand, put it in the trunk and left. Qi Zhan and Jian sat in the back seat one after another. Jian kept talking about the interesting things that happened at work during this period. Qi's father also liked to listen to his daughter share the recent events in his life. One of them spoke, the other listened quietly, creating a harmonious father-daughter atmosphere. Kenny put away his luggage and walked in, looking at the father and daughter in the back seat. "Uncle Qi, are you tired?" Kenny asked thoughtfully about Dad Qi's condition. "I'm really a little tired after flying for more than 10 hours, it's strange that I'm not tired." Qi Zhan squeezed his shoulders and rolled his neck. Even though he was traveling in first class, he was still very tired. Sure enough, he was old and couldn't bear the long journey. Moreover, he had serious jet lag, and he needed to get jet lag. Jian smiled faintly and stretched out her slender fingers to massage her father's shoulders. Although it was a bit amateurish, in the eyes of Qi's father, who could see his daughter at this moment, it was the happiest family happiness. "Dad, are you feeling okay?" He turned his hands into fists and gently tapped Dad Qi's shoulders. "My manman is the most well-behaved." Dad has not experienced manman's massage skills for a long time. "It is much better than those professional massage parlors." Dad Qi praised generously, laughing so hard that he couldn't even see his eyeballs, and from time to time he gave out generous cheers. "Smile. Ha ha ha. That's right, I'm Daddy's little cotton-padded jacket, so my massage skills are naturally a plus." Jian can't praise her. If she praises her, she will go to heaven. Although her skills are average, she can be shameless. At this moment, boasting smugly. The father and daughter in the back seat were chatting happily, and Kenny accompanied them quietly, giving them more time to get along. The car drove steadily for a while and set off towards the city center. Chi's father even took out city's specialty cloud cake from his bag, which Jian-Yuman has loved since she was a child. The two shared happily, and Jian-Yuman more considerately pinched a piece and fed it to Kenny, who had never eaten before. The dry cloud cake entered your mouth. For Kenny, a foreigner, although he has some Chinese ancestry, he is a native of country F and has never eaten too many snacks of country Z. I don't know how to enjoy the dry cloud cake at all, and my expression is very funny when I eat it. Finally swallowing the cloud cake, Kenny looked at the father and daughter eating cloud cake together in the back seat and asked with a slight smile. Uncle Chi, I have booked a room for you in the hotel where Manman lives. Now I will take you there to rest. It is better to have a meal first. I think the airport smell is very ordinary. You are not full. Kenny accurately guessed Chi's father's situation, and Chi Zhan nodded repeatedly. You're right, the food at the airport is really terrible. If you say it's Chinese food, it turns out, not to mention the terrible airplane food. I'm tired and hungry now, so I'd better fill my 5 internal organs first before going to rest. Okay. Kenny's car turned around and took the mother and daughter to eat delicious food. When you come to London, you naturally want to eat delicious food that can only be found in London. While waiting for the delicious food to be served, I enjoyed the father-daughter reunion for a while with my daughter. What I couldn't forget the most was about Jian Xian'er. Daughter, regarding that Li-Ning, when do you think you can find an opportunity for me to meet her? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1016. Chapter 1016. Dad Chi is here 3. Daughter, regarding that Li-Ning, when do you think you can find a chance for me to meet her? Chi Zhan said the purpose of this trip, and he couldn't wait to see her in the next second. Meeting Li-Ning was Chi Zhan's purpose this time. Even though he was mentally prepared to realize that Li-Ning and his beloved woman were not the same person, he still couldn't help but take a look and see how much she resembled his beloved woman. Okay. I'll make arrangements tomorrow. You have a good rest tonight. Jian-Yuman nodded, already thinking of an excuse to call Li-Ning out for dinner. Hearing that he would see Li-Ning tomorrow, Chi Zhan was very happy, but he still couldn't help but ask Jian-Yuman more. You said that you and the person who looks like your mother both have Rh-negative blood types, and she is still the same as your mother. Jian-Yuman also nodded repeatedly, also very annoyed. Having done a paternity test before, but hearing that she has Rh-negative blood type, I would really think that Li-Ning is the mother. However, the paternity test report is there, and no matter how she thinks about it, it is all in vain. Jian-Yuman has now accepted the fact that Li-Ning is not her mother, and slowly divides Li-Ning and her mother into 2 individuals, no longer making random guesses. But Chi Zhan was different. Even if he knew the test results, he still wanted to find out. I heard that this Li-Ning has a son, and he will even get married in 3 days. The wedding is coming, and Li-Ning will marry Xian Yuanxun's father, Xian Kaiping. When Chi Zhan heard the news, he couldn't sleep all night. He didn't know why he had a strong uncomfortable feeling, which caused him to be unable to sleep that night. All he could think about was Li-Ning's marriage. That's right. All the wedding photos were taken. Jian-Yuman also went to visit that day and was very envious when she saw Xian Kaiping and Li-Ning's loving appearance. She had secretly taken a few photos of their wedding before. She took out her mobile phone and showed the wedding photos to her father. In the photo, Li-Ning has a gentle smile on her face. She is standing on the beach with blue sky, white clouds, and blue sea. Xian Kaiping beside her looks at Li-Ning tenderly. His eyes are those of looking at the most precious treasure in the world, with deep love. Even across the screen, she could feel how much Xian Kaiping loved Li Ning. The wedding photos taken by this middle-aged man and woman are no better than those taken by young people. The two of them are originally a handsome man and a beautiful woman who does not look old. In the wedding photos, they are like a perfect couple, which is irresistible. People look away. When Qi Zhan saw it, he naturally noticed it. Looking at the wedding photos, his eyes flickered. Li Ning in the photo was so beautiful, her smile was so gentle, and her face was exactly the same as that of the woman he loved, so he couldn't take his eyes away. But beside her stood Xian Kaiping, a man many times better than him, a nobleman with a castle at home. Qi Zhan had long learned from Qian Yuman that Xian Kaiping was considered a billionaire, and his family's wealth was 100 times that of his. In London, he is a mover and shaker. Perhaps his international influence is not as good as that of Tang Yuge, but in London he is the dominant figure, and no one can shake his status in London. The outstanding Xian Kaiping is like a king living in an ancient castle. His relationship with the royal family of country Y is inextricably close, and he controls the fate of countless people. Such a superior being is indeed a formidable opponent. If he really becomes a love rival with Xian Kaiping, he will definitely lose. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1017. Chapter 1017 Discovery of Obscene Perversion 1. If he really becomes a love rival with Xian Kaiping, he will definitely lose. There is obviously evidence why Li Ning is not Qian Xian'er, but he can't help but think wildly in the direction that Li Ning is Qian Xian'er. Dad? Dad, what's wrong with you? Qian Yuman reached out and pushed Qi Zhan, who had been staring at the photos on his phone. Qi Zhan cast his eyes on Qian Yuman's face, which was very similar to Qian Xian'er's, and said with a slight smile, "You look so much like Li Ning." Qian Yuman raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "Yes, they are all great beauties. I look like Li Ning. I just look like my mother, and my mother is exactly like Li Ning's godmother." "Yeah. So similar," Qi Zhan murmured to himself, and his eyes couldn't help but fall on the wedding photos of Li Ning and Xian Kaiping. Is she really not Xian'er? Even though countless evidences were placed in front of Qi Zhan, he was not sure, because there was always a voice in his heart telling him that she was his Xian'er. It was actually very simple for Qian Yuman to want Qi Zhan and Li Ning to meet. Qian Yuman dragged Li Ning to the mall, saying that she wanted to pick out sacred items for Li Ning to prepare for her wedding night, so she dragged Li Ning to the mall to go shopping. In fact, she came to go shopping today to arrange opportunities for Qi Zhan and Li Ning, and asked Kenny to bring Qi's father to the mall. If they met by chance, Li Ning would not turn around and run away. Qian Yuman started to have a stomachache when she entered the mall. The expression on her face was very exciting. Today was an opportunity for her godmother and father to meet. Unexpectedly, her stomach started to play tricks at this time. She tried hard to endure it, hoping to endure it until her father and godmother met and introduced each other, and then she went to the toilet. The feeling came too quickly. No matter how hard she endured it, the expression on her face revealed her pain. "Manman, do you have a stomachache?" Li Ning asked with concern. Qian Yuman has been holding her stomach since she got out of the car. Although she tried to show that she was fine, her expression had already betrayed her current situation. "Yes. I have a stomachache, and now my stomach is very uncomfortable." She felt like there was excrement underneath her, trying to break through the last layer of restraints and gain supreme liberation. Li Ning smiled slightly and reached out to push Qian Yuman. "You'd better go to the bathroom. I'll go to the store in front and look around. You can find me there later." Qian Yuman looked at the store and finally decided not to embarrass herself. It was too uncomfortable. Continuing to suffer would not solve the problem. It was better to go back early and solve her needs early. Let Dad wait for a while, and she will come over later to introduce them to meet. After Jianyuman decided, she no longer pretended to be so, she covered her belly and said with a smile. Then just wait for me and I'll come as soon as I go. Go, Li Ning gently drove Jianyuman away, then turned around and walked to the underwear store. This underwear store is quite famous. After entering, Li Ning looked at the dazzling array of underwear and was spoiled for choice. Qi Zhan, who couldn't wait to see Li Ning, got out of the car first. Kenny went to park the car now. He sent text messages several times asking where his daughter was. As a result, Jianyuman got the news that Zuza was going to the toilet and asked him to wait for a while. Qi Zhan had no choice but to wait for his daughter to resolve the matter before going to see Li Ning. At this time, he saw a familiar figure walking not far away. From a distance, he recognized that person as the person he had thought about for a long time. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1018. Chapter 1018 Discovering the Obscene Pervert 2. Qi Zhan had no choice but to wait for his daughter to resolve the matter before going to see Li Ning. At this time, he saw a familiar figure walking not far away. From a distance, he recognized that person as the person he had thought about for a long time. Siener the moment Qi Zhan saw Li Ning, he walked towards Li Ning uncontrollably. The moment he saw Li Ning, Qi Zhan showed an expression of disbelief. Even if she was dressed differently from before, and even if her name was Li Ning, he thought that the woman in front of him was his beloved woman. Even though he knew it wasn't true, he always thought it was true in his heart. This was how Qi Zhan behaved at the moment. He is more conflicted than anyone else. He could not control his steps and walked towards Li Ning. He had long forgotten Jianyuman's instructions and his repeated instructions to not be reckless and not to forget who Li Ning was when he saw Li Ning. He followed his most desired thoughts and slowly approached her without disturbing her. Li Ning has felt an uncomfortable feeling since a few minutes ago. She always felt like there were eyes staring at her. This feeling existed wherever she went. When she turned around to look for her, she didn't see anyone staring at her. Is it her imagination? At this time, there were two young girls walking together next to them, with playful expressions on their faces. Did you see over there? There is a handsome middle-aged man. I see, this handsome man is very handsome, but his behavior is very strange. You think so too? I'm just talking about a man coming to a lingerie store, and he doesn't look like he's going shopping with his wife. I feel more like peeping. Yes, I feel the same way. It's not just my imagination anymore. At this time, the two girls looked at Li Ning meaningfully, and then began to discuss the matter of the handsome middle-aged man just now. Middle-aged uncle? When Li Ning heard the discussion between the two little girls, she increasingly believed that the person they said was being peeped on might very well be herself. Because she had been feeling like she was being spied on since just now, and coupled with the little girl's conversation just now, she became more and more certain that the person being spied on was probably herself. No. Has she been targeted by a pervert? The person who spied on Li Ning was Jianyuman's father Qi Zhan. He was acting like a pervert at the moment, secretly watching Li Ning, watching her choose underwear, and trying to avoid Li Ning's sight. His eyes have been secretly observing Li Ning, and when he saw the style of underwear she chose, his heart became more complicated. While observing, she found that the things she liked were exactly the same as before, the colors and styles she liked were exactly the same as those of her ex-wife Jian Xian'er. Her every move and every little expression is exactly the same as before. It wasn't because Jianyuman had said that Li Ning's paternity test results were out, that he could no longer control himself and stepped forward to recognize him. They are so similar. Are there really exactly the same people in this world, with every move and look in their eyes and even the same things they like? Qi Zhan originally just wanted to come and confirm with his own eyes that Li Ning was not Jian Xian'er, so as to appease his inner thoughts. but after seeing him in person, he became even more confused. It could even be said that he had no idea who the person he was seeing was. He was even more unsure that Li Ning was not Jian Xian'er, but it was deeply imprinted in his heart that she was Jian Xian'er, but there was something wrong in the middle. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1019. Chapter 1019 Discovery of Obscene Perversion 3. While Qi Zhan was in a daze, a pile of underwear suddenly fell from the sky, and a clothes rack slapped his body hard. Pervert, you pervert, why are you following me? Do you want to do something to me? Li Ning learned from just now that someone was following her, and slowly found Qi Zhan, who was in a daze. Seeing that he was really acting abnormally, he immediately picked up the clothes rack and used all his strength to fight Qi Zhan. The strength of his hands was not weak at all, and he used almost all his strength to hit Qi Zhan. Xian'er, this is a misunderstanding, I'm not a pervert, I'm not. Qi Zhan dodged quickly. Even though the clothes rack was not big, the blow was very painful, and the pain made him grin and yell. Hearing the pervert call out his name, Li Ning believed that the other party was stalking him for a long time. The pervert was still making excuses, so he became more and more aggressive. Kenny, who parked the car and rushed over, saw Li Ning holding a clothes hanger and beating Qi Zhan. He was so frightened that he jumped up and ran over quickly. Auntie, don't fight, this is all a misunderstanding. Li Ning was still fighting, looking at Kenny with strange eyes. This was the first time Kenny and Li Ning had met, but Jian Yuman already knew everything about Li Ning clearly. Li Ning stopped beating the pervert and looked at Kenny, who was coming out of the pillar. And who are you? The man who came out to organize her was young and handsome, and his temperament seemed much more domineering than the wretched middle-aged uncle. He must be a master of people. Li Ning was not a shrewd person to begin with. She waved the clothes hanger in her hand and glared at Qi Zhan angrily. Qi Zhan accidentally got the title of dead pervert in Li Ning's mind. Tell me, why are you following me? Li Ning stared at Qi Zhan with burning eyes. I didn't follow you, it was just a coincidence. Qi Zhan was stubborn and sophistry. Huh? Coincidence? Is it a coincidence that a grown man came to the underwear store? I felt like I was being spied on just now, and now I am even more sure that this person is you. Li Ning didn't believe that Qi Zhan was just a coincidence. He was simply a pervert, and even the idea of arresting him and taking him to the police station. Kenny's mouth twitched slightly. He looked at Li Ning's angry face and Qi Zhan's embarrassed and aggrieved expression. He felt funny in his heart and tried to reconcile. Obviously Li Ning doesn't have much affection for the stranger Kenny, all because of Qi Zhan. Just as more and more people were watching, the liberated Jian Yuman arrived. She walked towards where Li Ning said she was going. From a distance, she saw her father being criticized by Li Ning with a face of shame. She was willing to, and I was constantly acting as a peacemaker. Oh. My dad. Why can't you wait so long? Jian Yuman covered her face with a speechless expression. I just said how much I just said, so that my father should not act lightly. Obviously he didn't take it in his heart at all, but he still went to provoke Li Ning. Not only did he not leave a good impression on Li Ning, he was even taken to the police station as a pervert. It seems that at this moment, the only thing she can do is let her little fairy go to save her father. Dad, why are you here? Jian Yuman's loud voice sounded, with endless joy, while she winked at her father and gave some hints. Qi Zhan immediately understood what Jian Yuman meant and showed a happy expression. Manman, why are you here too? Dad, I should be asking you, why are you here in London? End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 1020. Chapter 1020 Discovery of Obscene Perversion 4. Dad, I should be asking you this question, why are you here in London? Qian Yuman came over and hugged Qi Zhan warmly. Actually, Dad came here yesterday. I originally wanted to give you a surprise, but I didn't expect to meet him outside. Qi Zhan smiled cheerfully and touched Qian Yuman's head. At this time, Kenny also understood what kind of play the father and daughter were acting, and immediately joined the acting team. I found out that Manman was shopping here today, so I brought my uncle over to give you a surprise. I like this surprise so much. Qian Yuman hugged her father happily, and the father and daughter, who had reunited after a long absence, happily exchanged greetings. Li Ning, who was almost ignored by them, looked on in shock as her goddaughter made out with the perverted stalker. This pervert is actually Manman's biological father? I never expected that such a cute little girl like Manman would have such a nasty and perverted father. You think this is perverted? How on earth did you raise such a lovely daughter? It's incredible. Qian Yuman and his daughter happily hugged each other and said happy words, deliberately ignoring Li Ning. But after going around, she found that Li Ning still had a bad expression, so she pretended not to see Li Ning's bad face and introduced her father to Li Ning with a smile. Godmother, this is my father Qi Zhan. Hello. Qi Zhan stretched out his hand. Li Ning glanced at Qi Zhan's hand, snorted coldly and refused to shake it. Qian Yuman looked confused, and Kenny immediately jumped out to explain. Manman, there was a misunderstanding between uncle and aunt just now, and the aunt regarded her as a stalking pervert. What? Pervert? Qian Yuman cried out in surprise, with an expression on her face that she couldn't tell her father was such a person. Qi Zhan immediately shook his head and explained. It's not what you think. I didn't follow her. I was originally going to give Manman a surprise today. When I saw this lady, I thought I saw my ex-wife, so I watched secretly. If they hadn't come out, I thought she was Manman's mother. Qi Zhan explained anxiously, fearing that Li Ning wouldn't understand, so he repeated it again. Really, Li Ning still didn't believe it. However, thinking back carefully, it seems that he did call Qian Xian'er's name. Did you really misunderstand him? Qian Xian'er is the mother that Qian Yuman has been looking for, exactly the same woman as she is looking for. And the pervert in front of him is Qian Xian'er's husband. Do you think he did what he did just now because he saw his wife? Li Ning thought for a while, the dissatisfaction in her heart gradually disappeared, and the look in her eyes when she looked at Qi Zhan didn't look like the fire-breathing fighting just now, wanting to beat him up. Qi Zhan breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Fortunately, she believed it. If he really thought he was a pervert, he wouldn't know where to cry. Ha ha ha. It's okay now. It was all a misunderstanding. Qian Yuman walked between the two of them with a smile, holding Li Ning with one hand and covering Qi Zhan with the other, and said cheerfully. At this moment, Qian Yuman, sandwiched between the two of them, had the illusion that her parents were reunited. But being able to see them together again is really more satisfying than anything else. Unfortunately, the Li Ning in front of her is not her real mother, just some of her little fantasies. As the saying goes, there is no acquaintance without fighting, and it refers to Li Ning and Qi Zhan. Later, the two of them had lunch together at the invitation of Qian Yuman. The two were very awkward. It could be said that they didn't talk to each other very much. End of this chapter.